Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised. No blood, no tracks, few clues. A mysterious murder scene. So brutal, so bizarre. Are humans capable of such an act? Or could this be the work of aliens on an intergalactic mission? Walk along the razor's edge between science fiction and science fact as we open UFO Files, Cattle Mutilations. August 25th, 2004. Farnham, Nebraska. This is cattle country, where the farmers rise early to move their livestock to pasture. Their quiet everyday routine is sometimes interrupted by the excitement of the birth of a new calf. But in this small town, tranquility is suddenly shaken by a gruesome discovery. A cow on Larry Jurgen's ranch is discovered dead, mutilated in a remote canyon on his property.
Well, first thing I did, I come around the corner up there, and I seen this cow laying here, and I thought, well, it's just an old cow that dropped dead. I wanted to see how old of a cow it was, and then the more investigation I seen her bag was gone, and I opened her mouth up, and her tongue was gone.
But this is where the story goes from unusual to strange.
I picked up her leg, and the first thing I noticed, and her udder was cut off. And there was a round circle about that size there, just a round circle where her udder was. Well, the tongue was gone, and I think that one eyeball, the eye on the other side was gone.
Standing over the remains, the ranchers are stunned by the fact there is no blood anywhere to be found on or around the scene. Strangely, the damage to the hide seems precise and deliberate. This does not appear to be the work of predators. The ranchers are perplexed.
That's part of this strange thing called an animal mutilation mystery. And in addition, the eye that was up, there was a circle of flesh. You can see that in the fresh photograph.
Linda Howe may know more about cattle mutilations than any other researcher. She has written books, produced documentaries, and investigated more than 1,000 cattle mutilation cases in the past 25 years. Farnham, Nebraska is her latest. Cattle mutilation cases tend to show several commonalities, and this cow is no different.
The udder had been removed in a circle, a very clean, bloodless circle. So the Larry Jurgen case definitely fell in the category of classic mutilation, and it had the addition of 2 holes that he found in the chest.
It is the appearance of bloodless, surgically precise excisions on specific body parts that qualify some cases as so-called classic mutilations.
You may see part of the jaws being removed, an eye removed, an ear removed, sexual organs being cut out. A lot of the cases, classic cases, have what we call coring of the rectum. As you know, cattle have quite a lot of blood. Humans have approximately a gallon of blood in their bodies. And you can imagine how much blood a cow would have. And there's none anywhere.
However, those in the veterinary field are hesitant to describe these conditions as mysterious.
Just the fact that there is no blood around on the ground does not mean at all that the animal did not have any blood. That just doesn't work. You can't tell by just looking at the ground around a dead animal.
Oddly, other animals will stay away from the site of the killing. And in many cases, a thunder and lightning storm reported on or about the date of the event. While these deaths occur in remote canyons or hillsides, away from prying eyes, the events are not restricted to domestic pastures.
The animal mutilation phenomena really is a global issue. And when you go out into the world, you realize that just like in the United States, there are hot spots, and they have been the same repetitive hot spots for 50, 60 years. Maybe this has been going on for millions of years, and we just caught on.
The long history of cattle mutilations has still another unusual element. The presence of unidentified flying objects, UFOs. Perhaps the earliest written document on the subject is a newspaper article and sworn affidavit that involved a cow, a politician, and a UFO in a story that predated the 20th century.
Well, back in 1897, it was probably the earliest recorded case of a cattle mutilation. Alexander Hamilton, a member of the House of Representatives in Kansas, reported that a 300-foot-long cylindrical object landed in his farm, picked up one of his cattle, and abducted it. The one thing that politicians need is a good reputation. I truly believe this is an actual case. I think this was probably the first verifiable story of abduction, a cattle mutilation case.
Well, it turns out that Mr. Hamilton was a member of a Liars Club, and he later cheerfully admitted this was just a tall tale that he had made up.
Whether the story is true or not, clearly the subject was publicly discussed before the 1900s. 50 years before Roswell and the sci-fi movie craze that filled our modern minds with images of UFOs. Cattle, horses, sheep, and other animals may have been mutilated as well, but were overlooked because the phenomena was not defined or communicated publicly.
Well, there wasn't any mention that I'm aware of really in the first half of the 20th century. I think the first case that we really know about is the 1967 case in Alamosa, Colorado. Snippy was the press's term for the horse. The horse's actual name was Lady. They, in their effort to get the facts straight, got the horse's name wrong. But Snippy was found in the middle of a field by her owners, and had all the classic signs and symptoms of a cattle mutilation. Once again, had surgical, precise type cuts that were found. There's no tracks or footprints found anywhere. The sheriff's office investigated this, and they could not come to a conclusion one way or the other what it was. And to this day, it's an unsolved case.
Over the years, one key element of evidence was eerily similar.
So, with the mutilations being strange, you have even higher strangeness of huge sounds and nothing there, or complete silence with what looks like helicopters.
Well, I think people are seeing something in the sky while this is happening. Beforehand, people will hear loud noises that they describe as being similar to a jet aircraft engine. Sometimes it's so loud that their whole house vibrates. Other people are seeing bright orange lights in the sky. So we really don't know what we're dealing with, but this is a very common part of the cattle mutilation case, is that you'll get reports of UFOs in the area.
Such was the case in Farnham. Residents started to share stories of unusual sights and sounds on the night the Jurgens cow was killed. The rancher turned to the internet looking for information. He found Linda Moulton Howe.
I'll often get a fax or an email or a phone call either from a rancher directly or for somebody who says, we read about your work and here's a dead animal, and that's what happened with the Larry Jurgens Ranch in Farnham, Nebraska.
She knows what clues to look for and how to acquire the forensic evidence to understand cattle mutilations. And this rancher is counting on her to figure out who or what did this to his cow. When we return, Howe attempts to unravel the murder mystery on the Jurgens Ranch. Cattle mutilation expert Linda Howe arrived at the ranch in Farnham, Nebraska to begin the investigation of the unusual death of Larry Jurgens' cow. The location was remote and hard to access, but once there, Howe approached slowly, making preliminary observations through the lens of her camera.
I am on a north-south axis with this animal. One of the interesting things is this is a 360-degree, surrounded by hills. Whatever happened in here, it could operate without anybody seeing.
She was looking for the classic indications of an authentic mutilation. As she stepped around fairly fresh cow dung, indicating the herd had been there a few days ago, she noted the far distance being maintained by other cattle at the time. Further documentation was made of the area and the orientation of the body. The cow lay dead for nearly a week. Then she went in for a closer look.
The ears are intact, so this one is one of the few in which the ear is not taken. You can tell even now with the collapse of the body in death that this was a very large, healthy animal, and she had given birth to a calf that had grown to 400 pounds, so she was a very healthy animal.
Despite days of decay and maggot infestation, there were no body parts or organs strewn about in a manner typically found when predators or scavengers strike. For generations, cattle mutilations have revealed livestock disembodied under mysterious circumstances and bizarre facts. The remote settings, surgical precision, absence of evidence, no claims of responsibility, and the huge geographic area covered over decades have led some researchers to extraordinary conclusions.
Well, some people do make the connection that this is an extraterrestrial event, and really there's no evidence one way or the other. But then there's no evidence that humans are involved in this either. However, they do see UFOs in the area, and leads a lot of us to come to conclusions that this could possibly be aliens involved.
Does our government have these craft? And if they have the craft, do they have hard proof that that which is in the craft is involved with the animal mutilations?
If they exist, UFOs could account for the rumblings heard and the light seen in the sky. Or even the cattle mutilations.
By 1989, I had become personally convinced that extraterrestrial biological entities or something from outer space being involved. This was, in fact, the story.
A story that tells of spaceships that may have the technology to levitate cows up to the craft, perform the surgical excisions, and then let them plummet to the earth.
And when you find that the cow had dropped on its muscles, it's consistent with people who said they've seen animals drop from glowing discs in the sky to the ground.
Would aliens possess the technology capable of performing bloodless surgery with precision, a process that humans would have trouble carrying out?
Most of the cases that we find, the cause of death is exsanguination, complete loss of blood within the body. We don't have the surgical equipment that it takes to do that kind of thing. The kind of vacuum that would require to do that is just not available, even in hospitals, let alone in the field.
But even if extraterrestrials had the ability to conduct this long-term killing spree, is there a motivation?
Some people say that the ET's motivation behind this is genetics, that they're involved in our DNA. And cattle DNA is very similar to humans.
This suggests that aliens are harvesting bovine biology as part of a mission that serves some greater galactic purpose. One that is well beyond human understanding and is vital to alien survival.
They can use that genetic manipulation to fill in the... It's not quite Jurassic Park, where you're skipping a few genetic codes to get to the dinosaurs from the amphibians, as they did in that film. But they do have unbelievable high technology when it comes to genetic mentality. So they can use cattle for their research and sometimes to fill in the gaps that they don't have enough human DNA for.
Also that human blood is transferable with cattle blood in emergencies. So there's enough similarity between us and the bovine to make me believe that there's some sort of research being done on our DNA.
The idea of aliens collecting blood from cows in order to extract DNA for some unfathomable genetic research easily attracts skeptics.
That extraterrestrials are doing animal mutilations is the least likely explanation.
Within veterinary circles, such theories may sound a bit too alien to be scientifically grounded.
I'm not aware of that at all, that there's that much similarity between human and bovine blood. A human has 46 chromosomes. A cow has 60 chromosomes, so there's a difference right there. Are they that closely related? I don't think so, but I don't know.
UFO believers aside, there are many who don't look that far for answers. They contend these mysterious mutilation occurrences are simply the work of pranksters or some dark cult ritual.
I have seen instances where animals were mutilated or maimed, but in all those instances it was corroborated with law enforcement effort, people that it was actually the act of a mentally ill person. But otherwise, I've never seen an unexplained mutilation.
We've been 30 years, 40 years now of these abductions, and nobody's ever seen a human involved in this. There's never been a farmer come across somebody in the middle of some sort of a satanic ritual or something.
For the ranchers in the western prairie states, cattle mutilations are a loss of inventory and a loss of revenue. And they want some answers. Coming up, the number of mutilation cases grows and the FBI gets called in.
First thing he says to me, you know, I'm going to prove that this is nothing but Predator.
By 1975, cattle mutilation mysteries were so prolific, Colorado Senator Floyd Haskell asked the U.S. government for help. In a request dated August 29, 1975, Haskell wrote, "I'm asking that the Federal Bureau of Investigation enter the case. Although the Colorado Bureau of Investigation has been investigating the incidents, the lack of central unified direction has frustrated the investigation."
The Colorado Bureau of Investigation got involved in this in the late 70s because there were so many complaints from farmers that they were losing their cattle. Well, this is their livelihood, and they're losing valuable cattle every day.
Haskell's letter warned, it now appears that ranchers are arming themselves to protect their livestock and their families. Clearly, something must be done before somebody gets hurt.
They didn't really have an idea what was going on.
Before the whole animal mutilation craze happened, ranchers were just going out and finding dead animals and scratching their heads and saying, I guess old Betsy just keeled over and the predators got her.
In his reply to Senator Haskell, FBI Director Clarence Kelly wrote, "I regret to inform you that these actions do not constitute a violation of federal law, coming within the FBI's investigative jurisdiction." March 14, 1979, New Mexico Senator Harrison Schmitt, a former Apollo astronaut, called for a federal investigation citing the mutilation phenomena crossed state lines.
I think they really thought at one point that it could have alien involvement. They really, at the final conclusion of it all, they just really came to the point where they thought that it needed more investigation.
This led to the investigation headed by Kenneth Rommel, who retired from the FBI in May 1979, and shortly afterwards assumed the role of Director of Investigations for Operation Animal Mutilation for the state of New Mexico.
He looked at many cases, and he was fairly open-minded with his investigation from the report that I've read.
Rommel had hundreds of historical and current cases to investigate.
Somehow I think his opinion what happened changed throughout his tenure with the New Mexico government.
Cattle mutilation researcher Linda Howe had a first-hand experience with Rommel.
So we get into the office of Kenneth Rommel, and I'm there to do an interview as a reporter with an investigator working for the state of New Mexico. And we sit down and we're getting ready, and first thing he says to me, "You know, I'm going to prove that this is nothing but predator."
After 1 year of research, Rommel submitted his final report. It stated, "After laboriously weighing and analyzing the evidence, I have come to the conclusion that the vast majority of mutilations are caused by predators and scavengers."
All of the news media were doing stories about what is this mystery that is stalking the prairie.
The subject transitioned from a rural myth to front-page headlines. News reports elevated the phrase cattle mutilation into the lexicon for strange, unexplained, and paranormal research. Cattle mutilations, like most UFO-related phenomena, have lurked in the shadows of U.S. government conspiracies since the days of the Roswell incident.
It's hard to imagine why the United States government, for any reason, would go out and mutilate cattle. I cannot imagine why. And if they did so, why they would do so in a way that seems to mimic the work of predators.
The government theory doesn't make sense, because the head of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation had said to me, if the CIA, NSA, DIA, FBI, if they were all involved in animal mutilations for some covert government project, they just go out and buy what they needed. They just take them to one of the military bases. They would do whatever they're going to do, and no one would know.
We can't prove that the government's involved in this. We can't say that there's extraterrestrials involved in this. We can't say that there are even extraterrestrials out there. There's no proof. They haven't landed on the White House lawn yet.
But Linda Howe has seen too many dead animals to subscribe to the government's position that all unusual deaths are the act of predators. Perhaps an answer to the question of alien involvement can be derived from the Farnham case. When we return, there is shocking news. A second cow is down. And Linda's investigation reveals what eyewitnesses saw.
Yeah, you didn't see an airplane, so the only thing you were seeing was that white light.
That's right.
August 25th, 2004. Jurgens Ranch, Farnham, Nebraska. Cattle mutilation research expert Linda Moulton Howe completes her photo documentation of the area near the dead cow. Then, she carefully collects samples of the surrounding vegetation.
And I want to make sure that I'm getting enough green chlorophyll because there's a very accurate test having to do with the measurement of the metabolism in anything that is growing with chlorophyll to see if there has been an impact on the mitochondria.
Elementary earth science describes chlorophyll as green growth matter in plants, whereas mitochondria contains the genetic material of vegetation. Howe wants to learn if these microscopic components were altered. So she records the locations and labels each of the grass samples she takes from around the body.
I'm taking about 75 feet north of the body. 75 to 100 feet is about as far out as, or as close to the body as you want to get when you are doing controls, trying to find what is the normal soil and grass. And then I'm going to walk in a ring around to the west. Okay, I'm about the same distance from the body, straight west.
She uses this same method of collecting and recording evidence as she gathers soil samples from the site. Then, armed with a strong magnet, she delicately tries to attract any iron material from the ground surface near the cow.
And I'm going to drag the magnet around the animal, and I'm going to go out in a spiral and see if we get any particles from any of this ground. Sometimes we find magnetite, which is unusual at some of these scenes. And in some of these cases, around mutilations and crop circles, what we have found is 750 times more magnetite that clings to a magnet than in normal soil. And that's why we do this, because if we get a big number, then we'll know something strange happened. And after I have done this, I'll put this magnet back in the plastic bag so that anything that I have collected will stay in the bag, and they will examine all of this under a microscope back at biophysicist Levin Good's lab.
Now, magnetite is the highly magnetic form of iron oxide. Magnetite is a very black, solid crystalline form.
Magnetite is found all over the globe, but the indications of higher concentration around sites associated with UFO activity may be an important scientific finding.
And the fact that we find these changes in grass and plants that are very similar in some cases, we're wondering if some kind of similar technology is involved, and if so, whose and why.
Howe soon turns her focus on the two curious holes found in the cow's upper body.
We're dealing now with something that is really closer to about an eighth of an inch.
You try to poke your finger through, or pencil through her hide anyplace else, you won't be able to poke it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, help me find the second hole. And when they did the necropsy on that one in Colorado, that was one of the cows when they found that the heart muscle was totally removed from inside the pericardium. The pericardium was intact, and the only thing that they could figure out was somehow that quarter-inch hole had something to do with what happened inside the cow.
Could this hole actually be a conduit that leads to the heart?
It's all muscle, pretty muscle and connective tissue, other elastic tissue. And the pericardial sac, I've not seen a situation where the heart actually just became soft mush and the pericardial sac was not affected.
With the help of the rancher, an important section of the cow's hide with the small holes is cut and removed for further analysis.
Yeah, now, let's bring this out here on the ground and see if we've got, let's lay that down and see now if we can find that second hole any easier. It should have been somewhere.
Yeah, right there. No, that's odd, isn't it?
After several hours of investigation, the team receives word that a nearby rancher has just discovered another cow down. They rush to a remote canyon on his property 7 miles away.
And you just saw this today?
This morning, yep.
Well, she could have died last night.
She could have. She could have been here, as far as I know, 48 hours is just my guess. Because I didn't see anything sitting here yesterday. But I could have just...
So it couldn't be 48 hours. It'd have to be between last night and now.
Hal and the others find a similar scenario. She photo documents the second cow and interviews the second rancher. Considering this as another hidden canyon, she is intrigued by the similarities of the two cases.
The most classic part of this is the one missing teat and the missing tongue, that we can't see it in the mouth at all.
The disappearance of the tongue is not easily explained.
A predator is not going to be able to latch onto a tongue and tear it off unless it's really rotten, decomposed. What they typically do is bite away at it a little bit at a time. And they just keep pecking at it. If it's a bird, if it's a small rodent, they're just going to keep chewing at it. One explanation for the tongue being back in the mouth, that it was out, and as the other tissues start to contract, it may pull it back into the mouth.
What's your take on this deal? Is it just some wacko doing wild stuff, or what?
It'd have to be a wacko that had access to the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere in every country you can think of, because it's worldwide. It's been going on since at least the 50s. And nobody has ever once been arrested and arraigned on an animal mutilation charge, not anywhere in the world.
Her interviews with these ranchers reveal there have been reports of some local residents hearing strange noises and seeing lights in the sky on the nights in question.
I was in bed, and I was asleep and startled out of a deep sleep
By
a loud noise. It sounded like an airplane or a helicopter or something going over the house. It almost scared me enough to think that it was going to run into the house.
And how long do you think you laid listening to it?
It was probably 30 to 40 seconds. It was almost like a helicopter, but I wouldn't say it was totally like one. It was just real loud, like a loud airplane, or... I mean, I'm right next to the road where there's trucks and vehicles going up and down the road, and it didn't sound like any of those.
Strange, though.
It's strange. Scary.
Stories of the unidentified flying object were recorded many miles away from the ranches where the mutilated cattle lie.
That it sounded like an aircraft coming in low, because it was a loud rumbly sound, and it lasted for a while. And then he came in about that time, and I asked him what that was, and he went outside.
And Dan, what did you see when you went out?
Didn't see it, but I did see a white light going that way, and a low flying, had to be an airplane.
So the only
Didn't see an airplane.
Yeah, you didn't see an airplane, so the only thing you were seeing was that white light.
That's right.
With the field investigation complete, the samples are immediately sent to laboratories in Michigan and Pennsylvania for forensic analysis. When we return, the test results. weeks after the Nebraska cattle mutilation investigation, researcher Linda Howe met with Dr. W.C. Levengood at the Pinelandia Biophysics Lab in Michigan to review his findings of the soil samples she collected in Farnham. He's looking for microscopic balls of black magnetite and iron oxide, and the reddish spheres of an iron ore called hematite, which are frequently found in high concentration at cattle mutilation sites.
This is magnetic drag material from the Farnham. And the main thing here is you'll see that the tiny, tiny magnetite and hematite particles are extremely small, from 5 to 20 microns in diameter, which is very small. Some cases we get up to 30 to 40 microns, but this particular sample is just these tiny particles strewn all over the soil.
So we do have magnetite from the mutilation site at Farnham.
Yes, yeah.
Magnetite can be found in the meteoric dust floating in space. Dr. Levengood suggests that it can get mixed into plasma energy, like the aurora borealis, commonly known as the Northern Lights.
This occurs way up in the ionosphere, about 60 to 100 miles above the Earth. These are self-organized energies that form what we call plasma vortices.
These atmospheric anomalies can swirl around so quickly that, like a tornado, they can spin to Earth and pull the magnetite with it. This spiral of energy may explain how the increased density of magnetite gets on the ground.
We're not talking about an energy that produces the bovine excision. We're talking about a number of interacting energies, what we call in science boundary conditions.
Linda Howe's explanation is that extraterrestrial technology targets these plasma energies at cattle.
And what we're looking at in this microscope, in a way, is kind of like the trail, the connection between that energy in the upper atmosphere that has come down and done something to this grass and to this soil. The magnetite is like proof of some unusual interaction.
It's a strong indication, yes.
Dr. Levengood also analyzed the grass samples and calculated subtle changes in the growth patterns caused by undetermined energies.
In Farnham, what you have found, the red and the blue, is that some energy is destructive and some energy is actually accelerating growth?
That's correct, yeah. And the neat part of it is, on this method, what we can do is we know that the way this energy changes with time in the grass follows a very precise mathematical function. So we can apply that function and see if this is actually metabolizing normally or not.
Dr. Levengood's analysis indicated Linda's grass samples were taken in a circular pattern around the cow.
This one is the one taken at the west end, and it follows it, but notice how the slope, it's almost flat. But of the animal, but it still follows that, it's still metabolizing grass. And this is the one taken showing the very high energy input. And you can see the difference in the slope of those two.
And this is the one that was north or northwest.
That was the one that had the accelerated growth.
And when your data, you found that there was a direction and a change in the energy before you've even seen these photos.
Yeah, now that...
Even though Dr. Levengood had not seen these images before, his findings were consistent with the photographs from the Farnham site.
That's where the energy was destructive.
That's right.
And the graph is related to energy out here.
Yeah, it'd be over in here somewhere.
Suggesting that something came in from the northwest.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Unbeknownst to Dr. Levengood, this is a significant conclusion because the witnesses to the strange lights and rumbling sounds also describe the direction of flight from the northwest. This hide sample removed from Larry Jurgen's mutilated cow featured 2 small holes that Hal believes indicate surgical access to the cow's heart area. The specimen was examined by the Chief of Pathology of Large Animals at the University of Pennsylvania's Animal Diagnostic Laboratory.
He wrote a report as honestly as he could. And what is so interesting, talking with him personally and reading the hard text of his report, he cannot rule out thermal influence at that hole. Cannot rule it out.
I've been a pathologist for 27 years. I have not posted a cow where I felt there was an unusual circumstance of why the tongue or the udder or the rectum was removed that was not explainable by predators.
Regardless of the outcome of the laboratory testing, this level of forensic investigation underscores the mysterious circumstances surrounding cattle mutilations and a question of UFO intervention.
Our government still stands by the Rommel report from 1979 that these abduction cases are nothing more than humans being involved or predators being involved. Aliens have nothing to do with it, and the government has nothing to do with it.
There is really no evidence that extraterrestrials of any kind are involved with animal mutilation. No evidence. No good evidence.
In the final analysis, no witness admits to seeing the cow being mutilated. There has been no claim of responsibility from cults, pranksters, or aliens. And there is no hard proof of secret government operations or UFOs. In Farnham, the facts stand. No blood, no tracks, and 2 more cows have been added to the growing list of dead animals that some call cattle mutilations.
Riveting films, 10 award-winning filmmakers, 1 unprecedented event, 10 days that unexpectedly changed America. Sunday night at 9, 8 Central, only on the History Channel.